Hi, Lisa.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Thank you for the patience in getting on Insta. I know you don't do it very often.
I know
Thank you so much.
I'm learning this whole live conversation thing with you, so we're good.
Thank you. And Lisa, I'm just so humbled that you're with us. It was a cold call over, just reaching out to you and you agreed to talk to us. So I'm absolutely delighted. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, I looked at your mission and what you were doing, and it looked like it was worthwhile.
Thank you. Thank you. Lisa, I'm also aware, I'm almost greedy to harness all your knowledge, but we have about half an hour today. So what I've, tried to think through is we have three sorts of audiences joining us: parents, teens, and educators. And what I really would like you to think about is in our conversation is that how can you give them a hope based on neuroplasticity around balancing achievement and well-being together, because that's really on our mind. We do want to get ahead, we want to better ourselves, but how do we do it? So that's really where I'll try to anchor our conversation, Lisa.
Yeah, that sounds great. Absolutely.
Right. But I want to introduce you first. Lisa is the founder of Neurosculpting Institute. She holds a master's degree in education, a foundation certificate in neuroleadership, certificates in medical neuroscience, visual perceptions, brain neurology, and she's the author of 7 books on neuroplasticity, including one titled New Beliefs and New Brain. So I'm very, very excited, again, privileged to have her here. But Lisa, I want to really start with a paradox. Is our brain wired to support us or sabotage us? We can't quite figure out. Why is change so hard when so many of us are so interested in it?
That is the best question. It's both. The brain is designed to serve us and help us adapt, but it is expert at keeping us stuck in all of our old patterns. And a lot of those patterns are for self-protection. The most important pattern a brain can engage in is one of self-protection, because ultimately that protects the future of the species, the success of humanity. So the brain is wired to self-protect, and then to make those self-protection patterns easy to replicate. We habituate to them very quickly because they're designed to protect us. And so over time, those self-protection patterns often become our self-sabotage patterns, because when we're just about to adapt, the old self-protection patterns grab us and they say, wait, this may not be safe. Change may not be safe. So let's grab an old self-protection pattern and hold on to that instead. And so this is the paradox. The paradox is the brain is designed to adapt and learn, yet it perceives change as a potential threat, even if the change is a positive change. A brain that's not well resourced can think a change of any kind is a threat, and then we're going to reach for our self-protection patterns, which are often very limiting and contracting and not at all excited for adaptation and anything new.
Yeah. Um, Lisa, give me an example of something typical where, for a student, they do want to get up slightly early, they do want to immerse themselves, they want to concentrate more, they're living in heavy distraction, but they're stuck. How do they really implement change, given the brain doesn't always support them for sustainable change? How do they get past that being stuck?
Well, I think we all like to look for the really big change. We want to make the big changes, the big progress, the big achievements, the big goals, and that is absolutely not how the brain wants to do it. The brain wants to do it efficiently and sustainably. So when we're looking to make the brain resilient around change, then a really great practice is to introduce small bits of change daily. So in essence, sort of microdosing, the way you might microdose a medication. You microdose change. So each day, introducing just a little bit of novelty, just a little bit of change over time gets your brain comfortable and familiar with change, so that you build a habituation to change, which is also a paradox, and then you prepare yourself to be resilient with the larger changes. So when I'm working with teens or anybody who wants the big change, but they're stuck in their self-sabotage patterns, then I recommend small novelty exercises every single day, so that novelty is no longer a scary thing to the brain. And then the larger change, and then the larger change over time, but it has to be daily. The brain thrives on daily practices. You can't do it once and expect the brain to be comfortable with it. The brain takes a while to get comfortable with new patterns.
Lisa, you spoke about efficiency, and I was going over some of the literature where you talk about the fact that motivation and goal setting, all of this important for students, creative problem solving, getting multiple perspectives, creating recall memory, all of this is in our prefrontal cortex. How do you make a prefrontal cortex more efficient?
Yeah.
We lose so much energy in patterns of thought, etc. How do you make students more focused, really? What can they do? What can parents do, and educators as well?
A lot of things, and it's not just one approach. So from a lifestyle perspective, sleep is critical to the functioning prefrontal cortex. So you must dial in your sleep protocols. Proper circadian rhythms. Waking up and getting sunlight in the eyes within a half an hour of sunrise is amazing for the body and for the functioning of the prefrontal cortex. Nutrition, whether you're vegetarian, vegan, carnivore, there are three main things the brain needs to function well. It needs healthy fats, it needs healthy proteins, and it needs healthy, slow carbohydrates. So if you are missing one of those three things, you're going to have compromised brain function to some degree. So first we have sleep, then we have sunlight, then we have nutrition, then we have oxygen, right? So we need to locomote, we need movement, we need exercise. All of this is the preset for a well-resourced brain. From there, then we move into specific top-down exercises, mental exercises that support a resilient prefrontal cortex. Meditation absolutely has been shown to improve the functioning of the brain, specifically neurosculpting meditation, which engages prefrontal cortex at every layer of the meditation. And then also exercises that create just enough challenge, but not too much where you get frustrated and you quit. And so on my Instagram channel, I have all these really silly, fun exercises with the fingers. Yes. This is directly supporting the resilience of the prefrontal cortex. They're hard enough to make you really think, and at the same time, they're fun enough and simple enough where you'll give it a try. You'll give it 2-3 minutes of a try, and you'll actually make a little progress. That's exactly what the front of the brain needs.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lisa. I know we study a little bit of Jiksai Mihai. You may have heard of him. Just to sort of get in the flow, I think students have to receive just that level of challenge where they remain engaged.
Yes.
But if it's too far off, and this applies for even curriculum and how it's presented, if it's too far off and there's no building blocks, they'll disengage. It has to be fun enough and challenging enough, for educators really to stack. And I want to stay with a couple of things that you speak about very often in your work. And this is the value of focus, time, and repetition. I mean, this goes to the heart of neuroplasticity.
Yes.
It seems as if for physical exercises, and gym enthusiasts among us are familiar with this, that they focus, they give the time, they have repetition, but when it comes to cognitive abilities, that you have to write your essay 3 times to get it better, or you have to practice math 20 times to get it better. We don't seem to do that. So what's the connection between neuroplasticity, focus, time, and repetition?
Yeah, I mean, those are really the 3 rules of learning, which is you have to recruit focused attention, you must put in the time, and you must make that time repeatable. So, and you bring up the idea of the person going to the gym. So let's just take that idea. Let's say you have 4 hours a month to go to the gym and work out. Do you do 4 hours 1 day a month and expect to see results? No, that's not optimal. And we all know that. Do you do 1 hour a week for 4 weeks? Well, that's better. You'll get better results. But even better than that is 2 times a week for 30 minutes. But even better than that is 3 times a week for 20 minutes each. So if you just apply the same principles, common sense principles that you would use at the gym to the brain, it's the same thing. So with your brain's ability to learn, the brain wants small, manageable chunks repeated over time with focused attention. And the way we really get our attention focused and engaged is with just a little bit of challenge, which is actually going to stimulate. Well, let me back up. There's a difference between mental focus and challenge and meditation and relaxation. So what I'm talking about here for neuroplasticity is not necessarily relaxation. I'm talking about a little bit of engagement. So with a neuroplasticity practice, we want just enough relaxation so that the nervous system is receptive and not in resistance, and just enough norepinephrine where the brain is focusing, orienting towards something, and engaging. And so we want that beautiful balance. And that's a sweet spot. It's the sweet spot of learning. And that really happens in small, manageable chunks. So just remember, time, focus, repetition. It's better to do a short practice 5 times a week than a big, long practice once a week. And if you apply that to the brain, you'll understand how to start doing your homework differently, studying for tests differently, learning anything differently.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Lisa, I want to, ask you to put on your educator's hat and talk a little bit about this, the balance of cognition and emotion, and how educators need to keep that on, particularly when there's failure and disappointment for students, because the brain goes in sabotage mode when you're disappointed, and the ask really is to re-engage with the matter. But you exit, you get a bad grade, it's an exit. You don't get into college that you wanted, it's an exit of continued effort. So how do you see failure, risk, and improvement as a virtuous cycle to be created in the classroom?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is that this is one of the most important questions, because we all want to quit when it feels bad. The minute we feel I'm not enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm less than, the minute our stress and our trauma and our wounds and our self-sabotage stories come up, that's when we feel the emotion of it. That's when we want to quit. So I think the first step is to understand the mindset. We have to start helping our learners understand learning does not happen from a place of already knowing. Learning does not happen from perfection. Learning can only happen from error and mistakes, because that forces the brain into adaptation and correction. So we have to switch this idea that learning should feel perfect or easy. Learning is happening at its best when we are failing. And somehow we have to get across to our learners that failure is critical. It's the most important piece, because from that initial failure comes an emotion. If that emotion can be harnessed like an energy into just one more try, just one more try, just one more try, then the brain gets very efficient at correcting errors, which means learning over time actually gets easier. You become a better learner the more you fail, as long as you don't quit. That's the key right there. If you quit, then you repeat and reinforce to your brain that it can't. But if you do the just one more try thing, even if you feel bad, you alchemize that energy and you make the brain more efficient and more resilient.
Lisa, that's just brilliant. I mean, we're at Sai Shiko. Sai Shiko is a Japanese word for try again. And, we wanted to anchor our work in science like you do, and neuroplasticity. And we decided that try again was it. I mean, you just have to get past that,
yes,
potential of quitting with that large emotion and keep trying. And this is, and I want to talk a little bit more, Lisa, about beliefs. I think, we very quickly decide that we're not a math person, we're not a person who can read long form, we, very quickly decide we are not good writers. And I think that belief sort of then leads to actions that sabotage our growth. Can you talk a little bit about, our beliefs and how they play out into what we may do in the future or become in the future?
Our beliefs become imprints, they become scripts, they become prediction scripts and programs for how to behave in the world, right? So if I believe the world is unsafe, it helps guide my behavior to protect myself. If I believe I am lucky, it guides my behavior to take more risk. If I believe I'm unlucky, it'll guide my behavior to not take risks. So beliefs are absolutely critical drivers of behavior. And if that belief drives your behavior once, and that behavior was neutral or beneficial, then that belief is going to drive your behavior a second time, even easier, and then a third, and then a fourth. So the beliefs that we entertain first in the mind, even if they're not true, the beliefs we entertain in the mind, and we invest time, focus, and repetition, right? I think it, and then I think it again tomorrow, and then I think it again tomorrow, will guide my behavior every time I think it. And then eventually that belief and that behavior will become so habituated and automatic that it is now subconscious. And now I don't even know I'm thinking it, and I don't even know I'm behaving that way. It becomes my baseline of functioning. And in this way, beliefs are both good and bad, right? They create automated behaviors in how we're supposed to relate to the world, but a good bunch of those behaviors are not serving us well. They're actually working against us.
Yep, and Lisa, what's most intriguing to me is that no one from the external world is going to come and check your belief, right? If you educators have a lot to do. There are 50 kids in the class, and if you've made a decision around your own progress, and that's why we're a big fan of agency and opt-in. Some of the programs we run, we always tell the parents, look, check with them. If they want to do it, bring us in. Even a 12-year-old should have this agency to say, I want to do this. Because in a classroom, if you've decided on your beliefs, it's, it's almost sort of giving up on your stretch. So I think it's important that we're a big fan of Carol Dweck's work, of the growth mindset work that she's doing around, what do you believe about your abilities will be very influential on what you do with your abilities and how hard you try. So it is important for us, I think, to create self-checks, and knowledge that you bring and talk about, I think, empowers students and educators. Lisa, what role do you think reflection plays? I'm a big fan of reflection in the classroom, given the structure of the brain, to draw connections between ideas and concepts in learning versus just memory. We seem to overemphasize rote learning often. So what role as an educator do you feel reflection plays in the classroom?
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about learning design here because it's one of my favorite topics. So memorization, so there's 5 layers to learning according to like Bloom's taxonomy. So layer 1, information gathering. And we're all expert at that now that we have Google, and now that we all can do our research, right? We're all these like experts now because we can type in a topic and get lots of information. That's not learning. That is the door opening to learning. Information opens the door. Memorization is really just taking information and holding it in place. That is not learning, because with that information, you must now comprehend it. So if you take information and then you move to comprehension, well, now you're starting to make meaning of the information. This is where learning really starts. It starts by digesting and comprehending the information you gathered. But that's still not entirely learning, because after comprehension, you now have to decide how that meaning relates to your life. So you have to apply what you've comprehended. So there has to be application. You have to try it on in your world, in your life. That's really where learning is happening. So if you're talking about reflection in the classroom, you're somewhere between comprehension and application. But now if you really want to metabolize that learning and become something different because of it, which is what learning is supposed to do, it's supposed to change you, then you have to go from application to analysis. What did that mean for me to use that in my life? What did it mean for that to happen? That is reflection. And then the final step, which is where learning is magic, is when you have gathered the information, you've understood it, you've applied it, you've analyzed it, and now you synthesize something unique and you put that out into the world, something you've never been taught, but is the result of everything you've learned. Because you have learned it, you've digested it, and now you are functioning in the world authentically changed because of something you've learned. And you can't get to those levels without reflection. You cannot get to those levels with just memorization. It's just not how the brain works. So to go through those layers of learning so that you are authentically changed, adapted, and evolved, you have to reflect, you have to digest, you have to metabolize, try it, correct it, adjust it, and then be it.
That's very inspiring, Lisa. I think often between comprehension and sort of adaptation, we kind of lose learning a lot because that's when the grade bit comes in and we're focusing on just memorization and then getting it out there. So I think it's critical to draw this link between comprehension, adaptation, and your real life context. I'm mindful of time, Lisa, but I do know you have comprehensive knowledge on so many aspects, education, brain, and healing. I want you to, if you could give 3 messages to 3 of our audiences. The first being an educator today. You know, what are they dealing with? They're dealing with teens that have far more exciting, well-curated entertainment at their hands than perhaps a long lecture on, you know, World War II with sound. So how do they grab attention? This is what we face when we run some of our workshops. You know, how do we get attention? So that's the first thing we want you to address just as we sort of come to the end of the conversation. For the student, you know, what role does agency play in their own effort? And then for the parent who seems to think that they don't have a role because they don't have those many hours influencing a student or a child, what's your message for them? So for all 3 of these, how would you sort of accumulate, you know, the science and wisdom that you've been working on for so many years?
Yeah. Well, for the educator, the first piece I would say is stay excited about the information yourself, because if you're not excited about it, there's no way you're going to authentically invest your passion, and your student's going to feel it. There's a transmission that happens in good education. You could be an expert in your field, but if you are not a good teacher, then that information is lost. So there's a transmission that happens. So for the educator, if you're not passionate about it, then you cannot expect your students to be. So that's the number one thing. Find your passion with what you're teaching, and it should be authentic passion. So I would say that for the educator. For the student, you have limited time on this planet, and every opportunity is an opportunity for you to be the best, most empowered version of yourself. So in the classroom, instead of feeling like it's a waste of time, what's one thing you can take from this lecture, this class, this workshop that will turn you into a superhero? So if I were talking to my students, I would say, somewhere in this lecture, there's one piece of information that if it embeds and grows like a seed, will become a superpower of yours down the road. Now you have to pay attention and find that seed. So as a student, and I love to be a student. I love being a student. I'm always looking for what's the one unexpected thing that I can learn in this very boring lecture that may turn me into a superhero in 5 years because it grew. So I kind of like to play those games with myself. And as a student, you can play those games with yourself and make it a fun kind of treasure hunt for that one thing. For the parents, you're not done learning. You're not done learning. So if you could be an ally to your child and understand you're not necessarily the expert to teach them, but you could be the ally and learn with them. And sometimes the student or the child just wants to know they're not alone in their frustration. And so as a parent, I would say, and I'm speaking to me as a parent, I needed to stop trying to be the expert in the subject that my daughter was frustrated with. And instead, I needed to ask her, can you teach me what you already know about that? Let's then try to figure it out together. And by putting her in the teach me what you already know role, she started to find her power. I didn't come off as another expert telling her what to do and how to do it. So I kind of was in it with her without without pushing her too much, because nobody wants their parents to be their teachers too.
Yeah.
So that's what worked for me.
Thank you, Lisa. You know, the common thread between the advice you had for all three of our sets of audiences really is we've got to take ownership and look inwards to improve. There has to be energy from the teacher if she is expecting that in return. From the student, there has to be a sense of, yes, I'm in this for myself as opposed to being suffering here. And I think for the parent too, this sort of, let's understand the emotion and you know, kind of curate some intelligence together so that the teen at least is feeling equally empowered and there's no hierarchy there. So it's just been a fascinating conversation. I'm going to be very mindful of your time. I know it's already, I think, late into the night there in Colorado, yes. But thank you so much, Lisa. I hope we have another conversation soon. The work you're doing is incredible. There's an incredible personal story behind your work, which I hope to have another conversation on. It was equally, you know, powerful. But like I said, today we had just half an hour. I'm very, very grateful for your time.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm so excited for the work that you're doing. And yeah, we'll have another conversation, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. All the best. Thank you.
Take care.
See you.